Is this an accurate representation of the ages-long warring of the Native Americans and the white man?
Who is this mysterious nomad Hayes?
Will there ever be justice for the killing of Francis and Lizzie's family?
What's in store for this new town of Horizon?
With Yellowstone seemingly in the rear view, Red and Red Real Reviews hits the open plains to take on Kevin Costner's latest project, Horizon, an American Saga Part 1 on Max.
Ahoy, ladies! Didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor?
Randall, look at eye contact, please. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow. Been staring at this board for days.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win. You die.
Act. Bears eat beets.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I am the one who knocks.
Bears beets Battlestar Galactica.
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh my god. The microchip has been compromised.
Dracarys.
Welcome back, Season 2, Episode 2, as they say in the biz of Red and Red Real Reviews, and you're looking quite red for this one.
Yeah, well, we're a walking representation of our logo because you've got the black Yellowstone shirt going on. I've got the solid red, so we are red and red in more ways than one.
Yeah, I've worn this one a few times, including for our pilot, so figure
Yeah.
we'll bring it back since this is Kevin Costner's little passion project, as it were.
Yeah, and there's a couple Yellowstone tie-ins too.
Yes, yeah, and that's not just because of the overall theme.
Yeah.
So speaking of Yellowstone, this has definitely been an interesting year for fans of the show. They finally get some kind of solidified timeline expectation of when the show's coming back. Everyone's getting excited for that, and November looks like a real thing. And then their emotion gets torn apart. Kevin Costner makes his decision to leave. And now we are presented with this two-part, which at first I thought maybe there was a third one as well, but two-part installment of his little independent project, Horizon. It airs on Max. I guess technically it came out in the theaters a few months back, but that must have just out of sight, out of mind, and for me, and I don't know about you, and I think most people probably were paying attention to when it was going to be streaming anyway. But what were your initial thoughts on the onset going in here?
I mean, I did see him promoting it. I think it came out in theaters back in April or May. I saw him making the rounds to a couple of morning TV shows, so I saw him talking about it a little bit. I knew what he had been talking about, which is that he financed it. He used his own money to bring it to life. It was something he really called it his passion project, so I knew about that. And then I recently, obviously when you said we should cover it, I saw that it was 3 hours long. I was expecting it to be pretty slow, to be honest. And I had seen on social, there was a Horizon ad on social media that I happened to just peek at a few of the comments. I just couldn't help myself. So I peeked at a few of the comments, and what a few people said is, oh man, there's all these quick cuts and flashes and all these scenes that don't make any sense to me and blah, blah, blah.
You're like, oh no.
So I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, for a 3 hour, kind of Western theme movie, that seems a little odd that there would be they were kind of conveying that the scenes didn't really make any sense. They were just kind of inserted in there and they were quick. So I thought that was interesting. And I was sort of expecting something similar to something I had seen recently that was also Western themed, talking about settling in the West. And so I kind of thought it might be similar to 1883.
Yeah. And I definitely knew it wasn't gonna, to that point, I definitely knew it wasn't gonna be modern times. So I wasn't really expecting it to be a comparable to Yellowstone, but at least because lifestyle out west is a lot different than on the East Coast and near cities. So even though it's modern times out west, it's still kind of a more traditional styles of living than people might be used to in cities and large metropolitan areas. But the length of it, the duration, that kind of set off a flag to me because I'm thinking like, oh no, it's another Killers of the Flower Moon or Oppenheimer, which Oppenheimer I thought actually moved pretty quickly.
Yeah, it
Um,
did.
and or what was that other movie, The Irishman?
Yes.
That Netflix did. That movie dragged. So I'm thinking like, oh no, it's gonna be another one of these 3 hour movies. But
Yeah.
I mean we have a note later on about it, but like I thought it moved. I thought it moved pretty well for
Yeah.
being 3 hours. I split it up into two just
So did
for
I.
yeah, just for the sake of ease. But
Yep.
I probably could have watched it in all one sitting. I didn't have any problem with the pace of it.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That was it's funny how we were proven wrong because I mean, well, this was literally just 3 hours. I think it was like 3 hours, 1 minute, like literally 3 hours, which was an hour less than Killers of the Flower Moon. So that was
Oh
already,
yeah, that one went over like half hour, 40 minutes or whatever it was.
yeah, and the
Like,
Irishman,
yeah,
I think, was 3.5 hours or something like that, 3 hours, 20
yeah.
minutes, something like that. So when you have this big like epic movie that's hours and hours long, or think of Titanic, how that was on two tapes, or
Yeah,
Gone with the Wind was
JFK,
another. Yeah, these
Gone with the
double
Wind. Yeah.
tapes, these double VHS tape sets. So I mean, yeah, getting into that realm, you're thinking this is going to be slow. I know it's going to be slow and boring.
I have one of those on the other side of the room actually. Anyway, holy star power. I mean,
Oh,
there was so we're thinking like, okay, I know Kevin Costner is kind of like a magnet to
hmm,
attracting a lot of stars to work on his movies, but like even with Yellowstone, like he's still the focal point. Like there's a lot of actors in Yellowstone that you kind of recognize from other things, but not really
hmm,
like famous. Where and a lot of the actors they kind of like Cole Hauser, people knew who he was, but he wasn't like a
right.
household name yet. All the actors that played the Dutton children weren't exactly,
You're
big
right.
time household names. So, but this one, I mean, it's funny you mentioned he self-financed it because that means he really, literally pulled out the checkbook to attract some names to this. So, besides himself, of course, Kevin Costner's been a household name for 40 years, 50 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, besides himself, Sienna Miller plays Frances, and Sienna Miller is interesting to me because she's like one of those people that's like the most unfamous famous person because like you don't necessarily think of her as the typical Hollywood starlet, but at the same time when someone says Sienna Miller's name, you know who she is.
She's really interesting. I was just thinking about this earlier today randomly, one of those shower thoughts. And I was thinking of how Sienna Miller has come such a long way because do you know what she started in? She was a model first, I'm pretty sure, like a
I think
supermodel.
you're right. Yeah.
And
For
I
SI or
think
something.
the first thing I saw her in potentially, she started first becoming famous when she was dating Jude Law, right? So
Okay.
she, I believe, one of the first things she did was in his movie Alfie. This was,
Oh.
oh man, early 2000s. So that was the first part that she had. And of course, typical with any supermodel, they're like, oh, supermodels can't act. So, like, they're never taken seriously when they become actors. So that was the first thing I saw her in. But I was thinking, watching this, especially the scene with Sam Worthington where they have that moment like kind of by the river and I was thinking about it and I was like, man, he has really transformed into like a legit actress, I think.
Yeah, and the first thing I always think of talking about roles that give a depth to the character and the actor behind the character, the first role I always think of when I hear her name is, I guess it's kind of recent-ish. It's not super recent, but she played Chris Kyle's wife in American Sniper alongside
Oh,
Bradley Cooper.
that was
That,
her.
Yeah, and I know I've seen her before that. I can't remember if she was in Sin City or not. But I know I've seen her in other stuff before that. But that's always the first one I think of when I hear Sienna Miller is American Sniper.
Yeah, she's had some bit parts, but I think similar to what you were saying, how Sienna Miller's kind of a, what did you call her? A not famous
The
famous
the the most unfamous famous person.
I kind of would put Sam Worthington in that same boat, wouldn't you? Kind of.
Yes, yeah, yes and no. I mean, the first iconic role I remember him from was Avatar. Like that was his kind of uh coming that was his kind of like coming to stardom moment for me. Obviously Avatar had all the hype in the world behind it, but he's kind of I thought it was interesting here because I feel like to me, and I thought of this actually uh, this after like this morning, he's kind of the original Glenn Powell, where Glenn Powell's kind of getting a lot of work lately, but a lot of his work lately has been typecast into military roles. And I kind of feel like Sam Worthington was the original typecast like that,
He
you know?
yeah, I mean, I remember him being in Clash of Titans, and like, so maybe he was kind of typecast with like fantasy for a while there, or like, I don't want to say mythology or epic movies, but yeah, I could kind of see that. I mean, also I love Glenn Powell. I just like I understand the hype.
He to that point, he actually has done a couple rom-coms lately, and that feels like
Yeah.
more of a typecast he should be in. The military typecast, I don't know whether I necessarily understood that, but he actually does them really well. He does the military role really well.
He's just a really likable guy. If you see him in interviews, he's really likable, but yeah, I guess so. We have a whole slew of people to talk about. I mean, so I would say, Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Giovanni Ribisi. I don't know if he's going to have more of a role in the second chapter or the second part, but I mean, he didn't have like a huge role. He was
No,
just kind of,
I kept looking for him, and I don't remember seeing his face until like the very end when they were doing the kind of quick cuts.
yeah. So in that last montage, in the last 5 minutes of part one, that's when you really got a close-up look at him. But yeah, it was almost like they were promoting the movie as like he was like one of the big names in it, even though he was hardly in it.
Yeah. Well, I only wrote down a couple of the big names, but you got a whole laundry list here.
Yeah, so I'll just go through some of these quickly because some of them are kind of calls back to either shows we've covered in Red and Red, or shows that you and I have watched and used to talk about. So there are some callbacks to characters that we know, and there's some just familiar faces that maybe they're not huge names, but you would most likely recognize them. Luke Wilson, of course, you'd recognize.
And I had a funny when he came on screen, it was more towards like the second half of the film. When he came on screen, I'm looking at him thinking, it sounds like Luke Wilson, but I can't tell whether it's him or what's his name? Will Forte.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, well, because he had like the MacGruber look to him. So I couldn't tell whether it was like, is that Luke Wilson or MacGruber?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because I split the movie into 90-minute increments, but the first half I watched a little bit past that because I wanted to end at like a certain scene. So when I ended my first viewing, it was like an hour and 45 minutes in. And that's exactly when Luke Wilson shows up. He doesn't show up until an hour and 45 minutes,
Yeah.
the last hour of the movie, pretty much. So I just think it's funny because he usually kind of plays himself in most movies, let's be honest.
Yeah. And well, to be fair, Kevin Costner didn't show up until significantly into the movie as well.
Yeah, Kevin Costner showed up. I think it was had to have been at least an hour.
I think so too. I think it was about an hour, maybe a little hour 10, something like that.
Yeah, a little over an hour. So and then we have a bunch of people you would definitely recognize. They've been in a bunch of stuff. We've got Jenna Malone. She played Ellen. She was in the Hunger Games. She was sort of one of those popular actresses like in the mid 90s, like late 90s.
Yeah.
because she was in her teens. So she did a lot of like indie movies.
I recognized her face, but
Okay.
I couldn't place her, and I saw her name in the cast, and I was like, I kind of recognize that name, but again, I
Yeah,
can't put it to anything.
I didn't know if you would know who she is. And then here are three callbacks. So first up, we've got Walter, who's Ellen's husband, I guess we can assume. He is the younger version of Nikki Pearson from This Is Us. And you and I,
Yeah,
we watched This Is
big
Us.
fan.
We raved about it, we complained about it to each other. So that was interesting. He looks a lot
Yeah.
different though with the facial hair. I almost didn't recognize him, but I was like, there's something about that guy I recognize.
Yeah, I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize that until I saw your note. I didn't even put two and two together about that at all. So the beard definitely threw me off. Especially because you think of Nicky when he was older and he has the beard versus when he was younger, he was completely baby faced. Um, but yeah, that one I didn't pick up. That one I didn't pick up on at all.
Did you pick up on the actor Will Patton, who is Wayne Tillerson from Outer Range?
Oh, I could pick him out of a crowd of 1,000 people.
Yeah. And he had
it wasn't a very big role. It wasn't. Didn't have a very big role thus far. He was like way into the end. He was maybe like 5 minutes after Luke Wilson popped on screen.
Yeah,
So,
he was in that same scene. He was like fixing a wagon or something like that. And it's funny because there are two people, at least two, that I could spot that are from Yellowstone. So, it's Will Patton and it's also Danny Houston. He was in the Army. He was the highest, I don't know what his rank was. Not lieutenant,
yeah,
because that
I
was
don't know
what,
that was what Sam Worthington's character
right.
was. But yeah, like for one Will Patton, like I've seen Armageddon so many times, I literally could spot him 3 miles away if I had to. Danny Houston, I saw his name in the cast before I watched it, so I knew he was upcoming, and like they pushed him up to the front. Like like
Okay.
IMDb kind of has a weird categorization for the actors. So he was kind of up near the front, so I guess I was expecting him to have a larger role in it. But he had an important role, but he just didn't have a lot of screen time.
Yeah.
But I knew him from Yellowstone, and he's another one. There's a couple we talked about off air. There's a couple actors from Yellowstone where you see their face and you're like, I know
Yeah.
who that is. I have no idea where I've seen him the last time, but I know who he is. He's very recognizable
Right.
face. Always plays the same type of character.
Yep.
So he's kind of an actor like that to me. Like
Oh, yeah.
if I probably would not have known his name if not for Yellowstone. Now it's kind of ingrained in my head. But before that I wouldn't have known his name. But his face is always one of those iconic faces. Like I see him, it's like, oh, I know who that
Yeah.
is. Couldn't tell you what the last thing I saw him was. I know who he is.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what he's from, but his name actually popped in my head instantly and I made that association quickly. But I just think it's interesting because them being on Yellowstone, you have to question whether it's probably likely that they're both people that Kevin Costner like personally knows and has worked with. So he was like audition for this or like
It's funny how he moved away from Taylor Sheridan, who's got the same behavioral tendencies as Taylor Sheridan with casting.
yes, and he's stealing a couple Taylor Sheridan show actors.
Maybe there's a mutiny in the bounty situation where
Yeah.
they're also all equally fed up with Yellowstone's pacing.
I don't know. It's hard to say there.
Of course,
But
to be fair,
then
both those characters are dead, so it's not like they were waiting for Yellowstone to come back
oh
anyway.
yeah, they had pretty meaty arcs. I think like when you look on IMDb, they were both in 10 to 15 episodes each. I'm pretty sure. So they had a pretty good arc. And then I would say probably the only other most famous, we'll say in quotes, is an actor named Jamie Campbell Bower. He played Caleb, who was one of the guys that got in a gunfight with Hayes, who was played by Kevin Costner. So he was actually Vecna from Stranger Things. So you wouldn't really know that with all the makeup and stuff. But he did have scenes in Stranger Things where he was barefaced. So yeah, he
Yeah,
was that crazy
one.
orderly in the
That one I wouldn't have known.
So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of other familiar faces that I just did not have the chance to look up to figure out what they were from, but so many because this was such there was so many different plots and scenes going on. There's just a lot of people that had very small parts, but they were definitely familiar faces.
Yeah, and as far as we just talked about the connection with other projects. The projects for me that Kevin Costner's done in the past, that this was kind of a toss back to. I mean, it's not his first rodeo with Western themed films and shows. And obviously, like we said, Yellowstone's more modern day set. This is not. So like I took a lot of this, not so much drawing into that cowboy mafia theme, but the early days of Kevin Costner when you think of Dances with Wolves. Think of the Postman. I think Dance with Wolves. I think he won. That was award winning for him.
Right.
Postman. I don't remember if it actually won, or if it was just nominated. That was slightly different. That was a little post apocalyptic, but it still kind of had a Western theme as far as independence and kind of you're kind of out there on your own and you got to figure out how to live and that sort of thing. Um, so what did you kind of like draw similarities with Horizon to other things he's done in the past?
I mean, yeah, you pointed out like it's definitely not like Yellowstone. It's not in the same time period, but I would say I think when the movie starts off, it doesn't say like 1859 or 1860 something to start off with.
Yeah, 1865,
So that's, I mean, that's like 20 years or less from 1883. So I did see a lot of parallels with 1883, or even Bass Reeves a little bit. Just, I don't know, just that like that Western, and then you had like Mary, who's like the saloon wench kind
yeah,
of like.
saloon wench. Yeah, and like early American industrialism seems that
Yes.
because this like frontiersman kind of deal,
Yes.
for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
I think
same
you picked up what I was putting down.
same time period. So and I wonder, like, I have seen Dances with Wolves, but it was years and years ago and I don't remember a lot of it. I don't think I've ever seen The Postman, but from what I gathered from Kevin Costner being interviewed about Horizon, it seemed like, he called it a passion project. He said, I think that it's something he's been working on for years. So I wonder if, being in Dances with Wolves or The Postman, if he was kind of inspired by that and wanted to touch on that more for his own project. And what was interesting to me also is I'm going to talk about it in a future topic, but and he talked about it in the interviews, his son, who's like a teenager, I don't remember how old he is named Hayes, and his son is in the movie.
Oh,
his
really?
son is in the movie. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but think about it. His main character is named Hayes, and then he named his son Hayes.
The
so
family ode thing.
I mean, and he did co-write it. He directed, he co-wrote, and he produced. So I just think that's kind of funny because, we all like different names in our head. Like, since we're kids, we're like, oh, if I ever had a child, I would name them this. I really love that name for some reason. Like, and I feel that that's funny that if he's been, if this project has kind of been in the works for a while, maybe it's been in the works for 10, 15, 20 years, as long as, if his son is like 15 or 16 years old, I mean, he's probably had it in his head for that long.
Opus of sorts.
Yeah.
And you're making my mind go down a dark path right now because you think of he wanted to rush Yellowstone. He's got this passion project. He's got ties to his kid, like it's an ode to him. I'm thinking, oh my God, is there some like terminal illness that we don't know about with Kevin Costner, and that's why he's like chomping at the bit to get all these projects done?
No, maybe it's just like he had kind of had it with Yellowstone, and he's like, all right, I just want to do some I just want to do my own stuff now. Like I want to go for the project that I've been envisioning for decades or years.
Well, I hope it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, we
Clearly
can only assume. We can only
Yeah.
assume.
The other thing is that this one, this is in two parts. This one I found to be a lot of storytelling. There was some action, there was some cinematic violence to keep the viewer engaged. But like we said before, it moved pretty fast for a 3-hour film. But a lot of the story was character build up and development and arcs, that sort of thing. So I mean, and normally that can drag down a film or a show. It kind of makes it feel a little slow and people fall out of it after a few episodes and most of the time. But how do you think the flow of this compared to things he's done in the past? Because typically he has done some high action works in the past.
I thought the timing was okay for me. You do have to pay attention. You can't be scrolling on your phone if you're watching a movie like this. With the way, and I kind of liked the way that it was done. I thought it was interesting. In the beginning it said 1859 or 1860 or whatever, and then there's sort of in the first 5-10 minutes of the movie and the last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, we get these like montages where you just see these scenes of different things, and obviously you get the sense that there's time progression because there was one part where it started with 1859 or whatever. Then there's a point where this guy is carving into stone graves, and it says like 1863 or 1865, so it's been a few years since the first scene that you saw. So it's an interesting way to show time progression, I think, in like this like really nice montage and like a beautiful cinematic version of all these different scenes happening, and then it's on to the next scene. And
that's a cinematic technique that I'm not unfamiliar with. I've noticed a lot in the past with early American frontier types of films, like time, or even just back in that time era in general. Time moved a lot slower because you couldn't just send a text message and contact somebody. You had to write a letter, and it would probably take maybe a month to get there because somebody would have to literally put it in a bag with everyone's mail and go around all the towns waiting for mail and ride it to the other side of the country. So it wasn't, so like I've noticed with other films that are in similar scene sets that, we're watching it over the span of an hour episode or a 2-hour movie or whatever the case may be. But in the span of maybe 20 minutes, you go about 3 years. And then another 20 minutes, maybe go 5 years. There is a lot of kind of filler cut out because life just wasn't very fast.
Right. But I liked how it was like it gave us like a glimpse of things. Like we knew if you paid attention, you would see that the time was progressing. But it was more interesting that way to have like a starting montage and an ending montage than to be like to skip around and be like 3 years later, and then you have another half hour of the movie, and then 4 years later. I hate how shows and movies will flash forward so many times, and you're just like, man, like these characters look exactly the same, like there's been no age progression, so like this is just stupid.
That's what I thought this movie was doing, and then after a while I got accustomed to what it was doing, and I think it was just like jumping around but still progressively moving forward. Like it wasn't going forward then back, then a flashback here, because they weren't like fonting, okay, this year, then that year, then back to this year. Like they weren't doing any fonts like that. So I kind of eventually I kind of got familiar with what they were, not familiar, comfortable with what they were doing, and I accepted it as more of a this is still going in one linear timeline. It's just showing you all what's going on at once. Maybe it jumps around 2 years, but it's still 2 years forward.
Right. And it was a way to show time progression, but have momentum behind it and keep things interesting and not feel like you're like, oh, whoa, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like it was a storytelling technique that I think was effective in moving things along, but not wishing things away or forcing them along.
Yeah. And I mean, seeing how heavily involved this film was and knowing how heavily involved Kevin Costner was behind the scenes, maybe that's the difference in why he couldn't, commit to both this and Yellowstone, because he probably just likes to be the chef in his own kitchen as opposed to being the star of the show and having someone else in charge of it.
Yes, that's what I think. I think, this being his passion project, he just wanted to he threw his money into it. So
Yeah.
he threw just everything he had into trying to make this excellent,
Yeah. So we're gonna go into our little film student session. Big topic here. There's a lot of characters in this film. I mean, we talked about the actors behind them, but there's a lot of characters. There's a lot of different groups, and I don't want to necessarily put the comparison of Game of Thrones on it, but that's kind of the closest thing in recent memory I can think of as far as so many different uh, development, personal developments in the film going on at the same time, and sometimes that's easy to keep track of. Sometimes it's hard. So we'll break down some of them. One, of course, like we said, it's about an hour into the film before Kevin Costner shows up, but he winds up having this relationship with what did you call her? The saloon wench, Marigold, where they don't show up till halfway through the film, but their relationship winds up being a focal part of the rest of it going forward. And it's almost kind of like a symbiotic relationship they have where I don't know, he doesn't seem like he's necessarily needing companionship, but maybe getting to know her and kind of trusting her to against the other townspeople in juxtaposition. Maybe he trusts her a little bit more. And then of course she's kind of stuck in this babysitter lady of the night mode, and she probably wants to get out and do other things, so she kind of maybe sees him as her ticket out of town.
Yeah, it's almost like he's just kind of trying to do the right thing by protecting her and Ellen and Walter. Well, it's just Ellen's child, I think. I think she had him before Walter. So yeah, I think he's just trying to do what's right. I don't know that he necessarily sees Mary as wifey material.
No, he kind of distances himself from her for a while, and then by the end of it, she's riding on top of him. And he's just kind of well, all right, I guess we're doing this.
But it was kind of more like she had decided she was going to leave, obviously, right? She had decided she was going to leave, so she's like, okay, well, I'm a small-time prostitute, so why don't I just give this old man the ride of his life before I leave? I think that's literally what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. There's a very odd dynamic. It wasn't will they, won't they, but it was like, do they, don't they want to be here?
Yeah, it's like
are they just like two ships in the night?
It kind of felt like they were playing house a little bit, with this child that they're just kind of stuck with. That poor, he was such the cutest little blonde-haired kid.
Yeah. But she was weird because she at one point she gets all concerned when she sleeps with this random guy in the camp they spend the night in. And she's like, oh, be careful. Don't touch the little stove. You know what I mean? You'll burn yourself.
Yeah.
And then there's another scene where she's tending to something outside and she's not paying attention. So, of course, she just runs over to play with a donkey where the Native Americans are, doing whatever they're doing. Oh, no, were they Native American or the Chinese?
They were Asian.
Yeah. Oh, it was the scene with the Chinese. Okay. Yeah. So he runs over there to play with the donkey where they are. And she's like, well, what do you think? You're just going to leave a kid out in the middle of this desert? He sees an animal, of course he's gonna run over there. So it's like she's both nurturing and non-present.
Well, I think when that jerk brought up he was like, oh, you're playing mommy or something, basically saying she wasn't good enough, it's not her child, and So that was interesting that when she skipped town and, she left Hayes, she left that letter for the Asian people and she left the baby with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy was really taking a dig at her because he's like, you're just a hooker and you're always gonna be a hooker. Don't try to pretend you're this nurturing woman right now.
Right. And you can tell that, she and Hayes were not really into each other because
Mhm.
when that guy was slapping her around, I expected Hayes to come out and
Yeah, thunder.
right? But you never saw that. Like he just
Yeah.
wasn't around for that
He
moment and she
didn't even
didn't tell him
care.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She didn't run and say, "Oh, this ass that I was, spending the night with, he,
Right.
is being a jerk and beat me across my face." Yeah, you think like you kind of get the idea that maybe she's a little bit of a tattletale. You'd think she would have run to tell someone, what was going on, and like here, big strong man, beat him for me because he's a jerk.
Right. Like they were just living separate lives with both one foot out the door kind of.
Yeah, yeah, like the
Yeah, going in different directions until she skipped town and that's it. He'll never see her again.
yeah. The next one, of course, this family of seemingly highway train robbers, I'll call them, led by the brothers Caleb, and I couldn't tell whether the other brother's name was Grattan or if that was their last name. Um, but they seem to want something to do with the Ellen and Walter dynamic, and I don't know whether it's just because Ellen seems to have some tie to their father's murder. At least I assume he was their father. I don't think it was ever really
That was their father
distinctly
that she
known.
shot in the beginning,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
But
Um,
why? Is he the father of the baby or something?
I thought that because that the child was a little itty bitty baby when she
Like
killed
an
him, and it was
infant.
winter. Yeah, and it was winter, which of course none of the rest of the movie takes place in winter. Um, so like you kind of pick up that she's the same person and she's tied to the father's murder. Uh, but Walter is like the one that they're kind of playing his little side business, whatever it is. Whether he's selling liquor, I don't know what he was. He walked in with a picnic basket. Um, so like they're trying to like play some transactional relationship with him in order to get close to her. Uh, those two, and they're definitely not nice people, and the film definitely sets up part two to have more of uh, an adversarial relationship
Mm,
with Hayes, maybe with Mary, because they're out tracking, trying to find Hayes, because obviously he kills Caleb, he kills the younger
right.
brother, in a gunfight. So what you're kind of, because what you're gonna take on that one, because it was kind of a major storyline, but it was to me it was operating on the sidelines for a good chunk of the movie.
Yeah, it's like we never really knew why they were trying to find, why they were going towards them to begin with. And I think they make a comment about or maybe Hayes makes a comment about no, I think it was them. They made a comment about they were going to steal the child or something. So
Mhm.
that got me thinking about whether their father was maybe
Sleeping around.
yeah, and like why would she kill him? What reason would she have to kill him?
Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, it's hard to say. Well, she alluded to Mary that before she met Walter, she did what she had to do. So she kind of alludes to the fact that she was sleeping around. So what if she was like a saloon wench and then, the Caleb and whoever's father got her pregnant or something and then he slapped her around or something so she shot him. I mean I don't know. So that's just kind of where my mind goes. But yeah, we don't really see a resolution. It's just kind of like a side story the whole time. So I'm assuming that part of it is probably going to continue in the second part.
why you don't be mean to people, because sometimes women will be like Mary and just run off and hide and keep on going, and some women will be like Ellen or Lucy, I guess their real name was, and shoot you dead in a cabin.
Yeah. Always be kind so you don't
Yes.
get murdered by a saloon wench.
Yes. Moral of the story here. The next one is, I mean, there was a little bit of a, cowboys and Indians type of feel here. But to me, it felt like the Apache tribe in this was very off to the side, and the main guy, I don't know if they changed the actor halfway through the film because he looked different in the beginning than they did at the end. But Pino Sine, he was kind of this bloodthirsty and power hungry um, war leader of this tribe, because he's the one that leads the raid on the village where Francis's family's camping out. And then he kind of gets disowned by the tribe. The elders like, nah, it's like, you can't do this because it's the white man's gonna come after us with with guns and fury.
Right.
And not only going to hurt the tribe, you're going to hurt our people just in general. So that was an interesting thing. And then like towards the end, you see Piona Sine kind of working with the cowboys that were close with the Mexicans. So
Yeah.
he kind of like adjusts his arc back from this bloodthirsty war leader to kind of, I guess I got to work with these people even though I hate them.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
but
I
it
feel
still
like
kind of, it felt like it was on the side the whole time. Whereas in the beginning of the film, it was a very pivotal storytelling point.
that's what I was going to say. I mean, first of all, I almost wonder if was that to show age progression? Did they switch out the actors for him being older? And then the other thing that I was thinking about with any of the Apache scenes, I didn't really feel like they furthered the story along much.
Right.
I feel like a lot of the movie was just really of like they had like kind of the what was it, Wyoming setting and like the Montana settlement. So like they kind of switched around a couple times to these different regions of like how they were living, and that's kind of what it was. It was like a snapshot into how these different settlements were living. So it was almost like, aside from the big scene with Francis and Lizzie, their family and their town getting attacked by the Apache, it seemed like the Apache scenes just like didn't really have anything to do with the plot. Like you were saying, it was just kind of like a little side story, but it never really like amounted to anything significant.
Yeah, and I was kind of disappointed by that. Like I like the kind of strife within the tribe between the elder and Piona Sinai, and I also kind of like the two little kids that were observing the guy finding the body in the beginning. They were kind of like watching, like, oh, what's he doing? And then they have like a scene later on with the elder where they're speaking English out of nowhere.
Right.
And there's kind of a respect or some kind of like grandfatherly relationship with the elder to these little kids, which apparently had been picked up by, some Stedler family off somewhere, and now they're back. Now they're back with the tribe. So I was a little disappointed they didn't spend more time on the Apache storyline, just because I was set up to think that Piona Sine was not a martyr, but like, I don't want, not martyr, but like a lightning rod type of character. Like this guy's gonna be a major antagonist, but they're gonna put him in a light where you don't view him as an antagonist.
I mean, it's still possible that they're setting the stage for, that to come to a head, or, in the second one. So I wouldn't kind of count it out just yet, but yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I didn't really think, I mean, basically what we saw of this was, for the most part, like the brutality of the Apache,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the scene with them destroying the village, and Francis's husband and Lizzie's brother kind of hold up, and I mean that whole scene, just watching the town burn and these townspeople all die, like I was like tearing up like a half an hour in, like at that scene, like it was just like such despair, seeing just everything they in their town and everything they knew being destroyed. And then later there was the scene where that group of thugs, I don't know who this guy was, but he looked to me like Pierce Brosnan with a beard. I don't think it was not Pierce Brosnan though. And then there was like the kid, remember?
In the settlement?
And they had the kid be the lookout.
Yeah. That was late. That was late. That was after Pino Sine was kind of
That group of guys,
cast away.
but then they remember one of them went and like scalped a bunch of the Indians,
Yeah.
and then like one of them
I thought of you in that scene because I know you don't like scalping.
It's just why, like that's the grossest thing that you could do, and why? Like it's disgusting, like why? But yeah, when that guy was laughing and like wiped like the bloody scalp on the kid, I was like, dear Lord, I can't.
No, I cannot.
I cannot do this. Yeah, I was like, I can't deal with scalping. So, but that was all that we saw of the Indians, was, a couple tender moments with that little guy speaking in English to the older Indian.
Yeah, I hope that's expanded upon a little bit more in part 2, because I was looking forward to that and the way they set it up.
I guess.
But anyway, that attack sets up another relationship where Francis and Lizzie are the lone survivors of this encampment, and the husband and the brother hide them in the basement because their house gets torched to the ground. And then this cavalry that's just out on their whatever patrol assignment, they're walking through, and there's another star power we didn't talk about, Michael Rooker.
Who's that?
He played the sergeant, Tommy.
Oh, okay.
Michael Rooker. He's been in a bunch, from Guardians of the Galaxy, the blue guy.
Okay.
So so the cavalry comes in, and they kind of like, okay, we'll come across this encampment, we'll help these survivors out just because, we're good guys or whatever. But I mean, we kind of gotta get on our way. But there kind of winds up being this relationship built between the cavalry led by the Lieutenant Trent Gephardt, and the sergeant. There kind of winds up being a relationship built between them and their men, and a fondness grown with Francis and Lizzie.
Right. They're kind of living among the army, right? For a while. I mean, I don't know if we know how much time has passed, but
well, because there was a group of 3 young guys that wanted to be recruited, or like they were lesser recruits or whatever the case may be, and they wound up like in full regalia by the end of it when the company leaves. So it's definitely that's definitely taking place over a period of time. I mean, obviously Francis was ready to jump the lieutenant's bones by the end of it, so there was some so obviously there was enough time for her to be over her kind of mourning, grieving process of her losing her husband and her son.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell whether it's been 6 months, whether it's been a year, whether it's been 2 years. I mean, we really have no idea. It did seem like Lizzie was aging a little bit, but I don't know.
Yeah, but that one I didn't pick up on as much as Pino Sine. Like Lizzie, I could still tell it was the same actress the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that one I thought was interesting, and also there was one moment where it seemed like Lieutenant's boss, Danny Houston's character, it seemed like he wasn't very happy with the way they were conducting themselves as far as going into the settlement and going after the Apaches for revenge or whatever.
Yeah.
He wasn't very happy with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then the last one, randomly, the Luke Wilson group. This kind of comes up very, very late, and this was a very, very interesting. Was comprised of a lot of random characters. Uh, and the Will Patton's character, they wind up saying his last name, Kittredge, and I think I looked up on IMDb that like the Francis character's name, her last name is Kittredge, which I don't think was ever mentioned during the film. So
Right. I noticed
I was
that
like,
too on IMDb.
is there some kind of parallel between these two groups where this is a familial connection? Like maybe he doesn't know. Maybe the husband was his son. He doesn't know that his son's dead for all these years,
Oh.
but he's with this group, or maybe they were part of the encampment and he thinks his granddaughter and he thinks his whole family is his daughter-in-law, his granddaughter, he thinks they're dead too, and they kind of got whisked away. They escaped the raid, and maybe they're just kind of traveling with this random kind of roughneck
Mm.
cowboy thing. Um, which of course the roughneck cowboys, obviously there's some funny little scene because you have these two people that look like square pegs and round holes. What they've got like maybe a British accent. The guy's writing a book, like they're documenting the
Yeah.
Wild Wild West. And his wife or his girlfriend or whatever, she's bathing herself in the drinking water, and these two like cattle boys are like kind of slowly rise up
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
cattle because they're seeing a naked woman out, and it's like so that kind of caused a little drama. So that's the only other character arc for me is like this little group led by Captain Luke Wilson, and
Yeah.
kind of like this is a little Land of Misfit Toys situation we got going on here.
And then the fact that the husband said, "Can you talk to these guys? Like they shouldn't have been doing that. Like, can you reprimand them?" Basically, so Luke
Yeah,
Wilson has the awkward job of kind of telling them they shouldn't be peeping toms at a lady who's like sponge bathing.
yeah, and they don't care. They're just like super defiant when he goes over to talk to them, and then just like, all right, you know what, whatever. So it's like, who's the real like the leader? Doesn't even seem like the leader of this group, you know?
Yeah, that was an odd storyline with Luke Wilson kind of being the enforcer of that settlement or that travel group.
I mean, we're coming up on time, so I guess the big question is, this was part one. Part two is coming up at some point. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head when, but are you excited for part two? And what are you like? What kind of resolutions are you looking forward to being tied up?
Well, I think I just looked it up. I think it was part two was supposed to come out in August in theaters, but it was pushed back. So I think it came out maybe a week or two ago in theaters. I don't know when it's being pushed to streaming, but yeah, I'm pretty sure they shot part two and part one at the same time. And
Yeah,
that
they
makes
probably
sense because
did.
it's like a continuation. Like I didn't want to compare it to Lord of the Rings because it's so different. But you know how like Lord of the Rings, like each like the first movie ends and it's like almost like mid-sentence
Yeah,
where it's like I kind of felt like
cold.
it was like that. Like it was almost like it's going to be a continuation. So I mean, I don't know if they were greenlit for a part 3 or 4. I don't know how long this Kevin Costner is planning this to go, but I generally enjoyed it. I'd be open to watching the second part, of course, but I almost kind of wonder why the decision was made to make a 3-hour movie. And I'm sure that the part 2 is like 3 hours also. It has a pretty heavy runtime. So I almost wonder why they didn't just make it like a mini series. Like, why not do 4 episodes of like 45 minutes long rather than like 3 hours, or for like a first half of a season or something, and then have the part 2, which is another 4 episodes, or that would be 8 episodes that would fill a season of a show. So why not do it that way rather than a big movie release?
Do it as a limited series or
Yeah.
fictitious docu-series as opposed to a feature-length film.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting that choice was made. But I mean, again, maybe if Kevin Costner has had this in his mind for a long time. Like, movies were just always the type of format he had in mind for it, when TV shows were not really as cinematic as they are now.
Well, and to me, it's also could be his background as well, because other than Yellowstone, I mean, how many TV series has he really done? I mean, he's a big screen guy. He's a film guy.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, that could be like, maybe he likes longer format things, and to me, maybe he feels that is a better way to tell a story in a the kind of flow that, flow and pacing that he likes to tell a story in, as opposed to a show. Obviously, you drag it out 8-10 episodes a season, and then you do 5 seasons.
Right. Yeah. I don't know why that choice was made, but I, that being said, it moved pretty quickly. So I would probably willingly watch another 3-hour part 2.
Yeah, I would too. And I mean, obviously the hunt of Grattan going after Hayes, and whatever comes to the Pinot today, obviously
Right.
the lieutenant and Francis' relationship. These are all things that I would look forward to being tidied up somehow.
Yeah. So, I mean, the assumption is that everybody in the different territories is going to find their way to Horizon, right? Isn't that the assumption?
Yeah. Which I'm glad you noticed that. I'm glad you picked up that was the name of the town, because I keep seeing all the banners. And I'm like, that's the name of the movie. What the hell is this?
Yeah, all the posters. And then I didn't see until, I don't know if it was the end or towards the end, where you can see on the piece of paper, it says like the town Horizon. Cause I was always like, what is that ad or whatever referring to? Like, that's named Horizon, and it was the town. Yeah.
So a point for all characters to go.
Yes. So they will all meet there.
Yeah. Well, meet us on all of our platforms that we stream on. And of course, if you enjoy listening to our show, if you listened on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please drop a 5-star rating and help juice the algorithm for us. If you want to follow along with our antics on social media, she's Binge the Ginge. That's dots between each word on Instagram and all one word on TikTok. And I am Nutmeg 2 Palmetto. That is the number 2. Give us both follows and stay with us, not only audio-wise on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but also iHeartRadio and Google Podcasts. But video-wise, if you like seeing the red, maybe I'll wear some red in the future. Will be double red. YouTube and Rumble for video. Episode 3 of season 2. We're heading into Middle Earth. Lord of the Rings reference you dropped there. And to see what kind of tilt these rings of power have to balance the hierarchy in Lord of the Rings. Rings of Power, season 2 on Amazon Prime. Season 1 kind of thought was a little all over the place, but I'm liking the way season 2 is going so far. So we'll cap that one off. Until that very next real review, Red, signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
No. Try not. Do. Or do not.
Because I don't want no scrubs.
Let the dogs out. You know, like, who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Peace! Smile, you son of a...
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Hey,
Not funny anymore. Chelsea references.
Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.